Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd end up in a heated property dispute with my neighbor over a swimming pond, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs at you when you least expect it. My name's Jack, and I've lived in my modest ranch-style home on the outskirts of town for nearly 20 years now. It's a quiet, rural area where most folks keep to themselves and mind their own business. At least, that was the case until Derek moved in next door about a year ago. From day one, Derek rubbed me the wrong way. He was one of those smug, self-important types who thought the world revolved around him, always bragging about his fancy car or his high-powered job in the city. I tried to be neighborly at first, waving hello when I saw him outside or making small talk over the fence, but it quickly became clear that Derek wasn't interested in being friendly. He just wanted to show off and lord his supposed superiority over everyone else. I did my best to ignore Derek's arrogant attitude and avoid interacting with him as much as possible. It wasn't too hard, since I spent most of my free time working on my property. You see, my home sits on about 5 acres of land, with a good portion of it being wooded. A few years back, I decided to turn a low-lying area near the back of my property into a small swimming pond. I hired some guys with excavators to dig it out, installed a filtration system, and even built a little dock. It was a lot of work, but man, was it worth it? That pond became my oasis, a private spot where I could cool off on hot summer days, or just sit peacefully and watch the sunset reflect off the water. Everything was fine until this past spring when Derek apparently discovered my pond while wandering around the neighborhood. I was out doing some yard work one Saturday morning when I saw him peering over the fence, eyeing my pond with obvious interest. "Hey there, Jack," he called out in that annoyingly smug voice of his. "I didn't realize you had such a nice little swimming hole back here. Must be great for cooling off in the summer, huh?" I nodded tersely, not wanting to encourage further conversation. "Yep, it does the job." Derek's eyes lit up. "Say, my kids would love something like that to splash around in. Maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement where my family could use it from time to time. I'd be happy to chip in for maintenance costs or whatever." I frowned, taken aback by his presumptuous request. "Sorry, but that's not gonna work. The pond's private, just for me and my family." Derek's smile faltered for a moment before he pasted it back on. "Oh come on, don't be like that. What's the harm in sharing? There's plenty of room for everyone." "Look," I said firmly, "I put a lot of time and money into building that pond. It's on my property and it's not open to the public. End of story?" With that, I turned and walked away, hoping that would be the end of it. But unfortunately, Derek wasn't the type to take no for an answer. Over the next few weeks, he kept bringing up the pond every chance he got. He'd try to cajole me into letting his family use it, then switch to guilt-tripping when that didn't work. "It's a shame to let such a nice swimming spot go to waste," he'd say with exaggerated disappointment. Or he'd make snide comments about how some people just don't know how to be good neighbors. I continued to rebuff Derek's attempts, growing more irritated each time. But things really came to a head one sweltering afternoon in early July. I had just gotten home from running errands and was looking forward to taking a refreshing dip in my pond. As I walked around to the backyard, I heard splashing and laughter coming from that direction. My blood began to boil as I rounded the corner and saw Derek, his wife, and their 2 young kids frolicking in my pond. They had spread towels on the dock and set up a little picnic area on the bank. Derek was floating on an inflatable raft, sipping a beer like he owned the place. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, storming over to the water's edge. Derek looked up lazily, not even having the decency to appear sheepish. "Oh hey Jack, hope you don't mind. It was so hot out, we just couldn't resist taking a quick dip to cool off." "Are you kidding me?" I sputtered, struggling to control my anger. "I've told you multiple times that this pond is private. You're trespassing on my property." Derek's wife at least had the grace to look embarrassed, quickly ushering the kids out of the water. But Derek just rolled his eyes. "Come on, don't be so uptight," he said dismissively. "It's just a little swim. No need to get your panties in a bunch." That flippant response was the last straw. "Get out, now," I growled. "All of you, off my property this instant before I call the police." Derek's smug expression finally faltered as he realized I was dead serious. He climbed out of the pond, dripping water everywhere. All right, we're going," he muttered. "No need to make threats. But seriously, Jack, you need to learn to relax and be a better neighbor." I stood there seething as Derek and his family gathered up their things and trudged back towards their yard. The sheer audacity of this guy was unbelievable. Who did he think he was to just invite himself onto my property and use my pond without permission? After they left, I immediately went inside and called a fencing company. I arranged to have a sturdy privacy fence installed around the entire perimeter of my backyard, including the pond area. It was expensive, but well worth it for the peace of mind. When the fence went up a couple weeks later, Derek predictably threw a fit. He came stomping over, red-faced and blustering about how unfriendly and unwelcoming I was being. I calmly informed him that I had every right to fence in my own property, and suggested he mind his own business from now on. I thought that would finally be the end of it. The fence was up, I had made my position crystal clear, and surely even Derek would get the message now. How wrong I was. One Saturday afternoon about a month later, I was relaxing on my back porch when I heard voices and splashing coming from the direction of my pond. At first I thought I must be imagining things. There was no way anyone could be back there with the new fence up. But as I listened, I distinctly heard children laughing, and what sounded like Derek's voice. Furious, I stormed around to the pond area. To my shock and disbelief, there was Derek and his whole family once again swimming in my pond and lounging on the dock. Somehow, they had cut a large hole in my brand new privacy fence to gain access. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" I bellowed, seeing red. "You've destroyed my fence and you're trespassing again." Derek barely glanced up from where he was sprawled on a lounger. "Relax, Jack. We're just enjoying a nice afternoon swim. No need to get all worked up." "This is my property," I yelled. "I've told you repeatedly that you're not welcome here. You had absolutely no right to damage my fence and break in like this." Derek sat up, his face twisted in a sneer. "Oh please, this is a neighborhood pond that everyone should be able to enjoy. You don't own it." I gaped at him, momentarily struck speechless by his delusional assertion. "Are you out of your mind? Of course I own it. I had it built on my own property." "Well, I think you're mistaken," Derek said with smug certainty. "This pond is clearly on the boundary between our properties. That means it's a shared resource. You can't keep it all to yourself." "That's complete nonsense," I sputtered. "The property line is nowhere near here. The pond is entirely on my land, which you are currently trespassing on. Now get out before I call the police." Derek waved his hand dismissively. "Go ahead and call them. I'm not going anywhere. This is a public pond and I have every right to be here." Shaking with anger, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed 911. I quickly explained the situation to the dispatcher, who said they would send officers right away. "The police are on their way," I informed Derek. "I suggest you and your family leave immediately." But Derek just smirked and took another sip of his beer. "Fine by me. I'll be happy to explain to the cops how you're trying to monopolize a neighborhood resource. They'll straighten you out real quick." I paced anxiously as we waited for the police to arrive, fuming at Derek's arrogant certainty. How could anyone be so entitled and delusional? Did he really think he could just claim ownership of something on my property? About 15 minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled up out front. I hurried to meet the officers and explain the situation. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I've got a neighbor who's trespassing on my property and refusing to leave. He and his family cut a hole in my fence to access my private pond." One of the officers, a middle-aged man with graying hair, nodded. "All right, sir. Can you show us where this is happening?" I led the 2 officers around to the back of my property. Derek was still lounging by the pond with his family, looking maddeningly unconcerned. "There they are," I said, pointing. "That's my pond that I had built on my property. They've no right to be here." The older officer turned to Derek. "Sir, this man says you're trespassing on his private property. We're going to need you and your family to leave the area." Derek stood up, puffing out his chest. "Officer, I'm glad you're here. This man is trying to deny the neighborhood access to a shared pond. I have every right to be here." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Do you have any documentation showing your ownership claim to this pond?" "Well, no," Derek admitted, "but it's clearly on the property line between our yards. That makes it a shared resource." I interjected, "That's completely false. The property line is nowhere near here. This pond is entirely on my land." The officer turned to me. "Do you have documentation proving your ownership, sir?" "Absolutely," I said. "I have the deed to my property inside, as well as the permits and receipts from when I had the pond installed. I'd be happy to show you." "That would be helpful," the officer nodded. I quickly went inside and gathered up all the relevant paperwork, including a survey map clearly showing the pond was well within my property lines. I brought it out and handed it to the officers. They looked it over carefully, conferring quietly with each other. After a few minutes, the older officer turned back to Derek. "Sir, I've reviewed the documentation, and it's clear that this pond is located entirely on this man's private property. You and your family need to leave immediately." Derek's smug expression finally faltered. But that can't be right. This is supposed to be for the whole neighborhood." "I'm afraid not," the officer said firmly. "You're trespassing on private property, and you've damaged this man's fence to gain access. I strongly suggest you leave now before we have to take further action." Derek's wife tugged on his arm. "Come on, honey, let's just go." But Derek shook her off, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "No, this isn't right. He can't just hog this pond all to himself." "Sir, this is your final warning," the officer said sternly. "Leave the property now or you will be arrested for trespassing." Finally, Derek seemed to deflate as reality set in. "Fine," he muttered. "Come on, kids, let's go." I watched with immense satisfaction as Derek and his family gathered up their things and trudged out through the hole in my fence. The officers followed to make sure they left the property. "Thank you so much," I said to the police as they prepared to leave. "I really appreciate you coming out to handle this." The older officer nodded. "No problem, sir. You might want to look into pressing charges for the damage to your fence, and I'd suggest installing some security cameras back here in case they try this again." That's a great idea, I agreed. I'll definitely do that. After the police left, I sat down on my dock, finally able to relax and enjoy my pond in peace. The nerve of that guy, thinking he could just take over my property like that. But justice had prevailed in the end. Over the next few days, I had the fence repaired and installed a top-of-the-line security camera system covering my entire backyard. I also put up several very clear no trespassing signs around the perimeter. To my relief, Derek and his family stayed away after that. I'd occasionally catch him glaring at me from his yard, but he didn't dare try to access my pond again. Eventually, he seemed to give up entirely and just pretended my backyard didn't exist. Word of the incident spread quickly through the neighborhood grapevine. To my surprise, several of my other neighbors stopped by to express their support and commiserate about Derek's entitled behavior. Apparently he had been making himself quite unpopular with his arrogant attitude. "I can't believe he tried to claim your pond like that," my neighbor Susan said, shaking her head. "The nerve of some people? Good for you for standing up to him." Another neighbor, Bill, clapped me on the shoulder. "You did the right thing, Jack. Can't let folks walk all over you like that." That Derek needed to be taken down a peg or two. Their words of encouragement meant a lot to me. It was reassuring to know I had the support of the rest of the neighborhood. As the weeks went by, life gradually returned to normal. I was able to enjoy my pond in peace once again, without having to worry about uninvited guests. Derek kept his distance, though I'd occasionally catch him staring wistfully at my backyard on hot days. Part of me felt a little bad. I could understand the appeal of a nice swimming pond on a sweltering summer afternoon, but I quickly pushed those feelings aside. I had put a lot of time, money, and effort into creating this oasis for myself. I had no obligation to share it with entitled jerks who thought they could just help themselves to other people's property. One day, as I was floating lazily in my pond, I reflected on how the whole ordeal had actually brought me closer to my other neighbors. We'd formed a tighter-knit community, united in our exasperation with Derek's antics. Several of us had started having regular cookouts and get-togethers. I even invited a few of my favorite neighbors over for a pond party one weekend. As we splashed and laughed in the cool water, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Derek's attempt to take over my pond had backfired spectacularly. Instead of becoming a neighborhood resource as he'd claimed to want, it had become a special place for me to bond with my true friends and neighbors, the ones who respected boundaries and didn't try to claim things that didn't belong to them. As the summer wore on, I noticed Derek spending less and less time outside. The few times I saw him, he looked miserable and sweaty in the heat. Part of me almost felt tempted to extend an olive branch and invite him to join us for a swim one day. Almost? But then I'd remember his smug entitlement, his blatant disregard for my property rights, and the way he'd sneered at me when I confronted him. Nope, he'd made his bed and now he could lie in it, sweating away in his yard while I enjoyed my cool, refreshing oasis. One particularly sweltering afternoon in late August, I was out trimming some bushes near the fence line when I heard Derek's voice drift over. Hey Jack?" he called hesitantly. I straightened up, wiping sweat from my brow. "Yeah?" There was a long pause before Derek spoke again, sounding uncharacteristically humble. "Look, I just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened earlier this summer. I was way out of line." I blinked in surprise, not sure how to respond. This was the last thing I'd expected to hear from Derek. He continued, "I got caught up in the idea of having a nice place for my kids to swim, and I let it cloud my judgment. I never should have trespassed on your property or damaged your fence. It was wrong and I feel terrible about it." I was silent for a moment, processing this unexpected apology. Finally I replied, "I appreciate you saying that, Derek. Thank you. I understand if you can't forgive me," he went on, "but I hope maybe we can at least be civil neighbors going forward. I promise I'll respect your property and privacy from now on." I considered his words carefully. While I wasn't ready to fully trust Derek again, I had to admit his apology seemed genuine, and holding on to anger and resentment wasn't doing anyone any good. "All right," I said finally, "I accept your apology. Let's start fresh and try to be good neighbors to each other." I could practically hear the relief in Derek's voice. "Thank you, Jack. I really appreciate that. And hey, if there's ever anything I can do to make amends, just let me know." An idea struck me. "Well, now that you mention it, I've been thinking about expanding the pond a bit, maybe adding a deeper swimming area. Could use an extra set of hands with the digging if you're interested." There was a moment of surprised silence before Derek replied enthusiastically, "Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to help out. Just let me know when." I smiled to myself, feeling like a weight had been lifted. Will do. Take care, Derek. You too, Jack. And thanks again." As I went back to my yard work, I felt a sense of satisfaction. The whole pond debacle had been a headache, but in the end, it seemed to have a positive outcome. Derek had learned an important lesson about respecting others' property. I'd grown closer with my other neighbors, and now, it looked like Derek and I might even be on the path to forging a real friendship. I chuckled as I imagined us working side by side to improve the very pond that had caused so much strife between us. Life really did work in mysterious ways sometimes. All it took was a little communication, humility, and willingness to move forward. That evening, as I sat on my dock watching the sunset reflect off the pond's surface, I felt truly at peace. My oasis was still my own private sanctuary, but now it represented something more, a reminder that even the worst conflicts can lead to growth and understanding if we're willing to learn from our mistakes. I took a deep breath, savoring the tranquil moment. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd start sketching out plans for the pond expansion. And who knew? Maybe someday, when the work was done and trust was fully rebuilt, I might even invite Derek and his family over for a neighborly swim. But for now, I was content to simply enjoy my hard-won slice of paradise, grateful for the unexpected journey that had led me here. As twilight deepened into night, I reluctantly headed inside, already looking forward to my next peaceful afternoon by the water. My swimming pond had become so much more than just a place to cool off. It was a symbol of perseverance, growth, and the power of setting boundaries while still leaving room for redemption. I drifted off to sleep that night with a smile on my face, dreaming of lazy summer days spent floating on the clear blue water, surrounded by good neighbors and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, standing your ground can lead to the sweetest victories of all. Update. The next few months saw a gradual but significant shift in the dynamics between Derek and me. True to his word, he maintained a respectful distance and didn't attempt to access my pond again without permission. I noticed he had even installed a small above-ground pool in his own backyard for his kids to enjoy. While it wasn't quite the same as my pond, it seemed to keep his family happy during the hot days. As autumn approached, I decided to take Derek up on his offer to help with the pond expansion. I spent a few weekends sketching out plans and calculating the materials we'd need. Once I had everything worked out, I called Derek over to discuss the project. "Hey Derek," I said as he approached the fence. "Remember how you offered to help out with some work on the pond? Well, I've got the plans drawn up if you're still interested." Derek's face lit up. "Absolutely. I'd be glad to lend a hand. What did you have in mind?" I showed him the sketches, explaining how I wanted to expand the deep end for better swimming, and add a small beach area on one side. Derek listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and even offering a few suggestions of his own. "This looks great, Jack," he said when I finished. "When do you want to get started?" We agreed to begin the following weekend. To my surprise, Derek showed up early Saturday morning with coffee and donuts for both of us. As we fueled up for the day's work, we fell into easy conversation about our jobs, families, and shared interests. It turned out we had more in common than I'd realized. The work was hard but satisfying. We spent long hours digging, hauling dirt, and carefully shaping the new contours of the pond. Derek proved to be a dedicated worker, never complaining even when the sun beat down mercilessly, or we hit a particularly stubborn patch of clay. As we worked side by side, sweating and joking, I found myself actually enjoying Derek's company. His arrogant facade had melted away, replaced by a genuine eagerness to help and a self-deprecating sense of humor about his past behavior. "You know," he said one afternoon as we paused for a water break, "I still can't believe what an ass I was about this pond. Looking at all the work that goes into it. Man, I feel even worse now for trying to just take it over." I nodded, appreciating his honesty. "Well, the important thing is you realized your mistake and made amends. That says a lot about your character." Derek smiled gratefully. "Thanks, Jack. I'm just glad you were willing to give me a second chance. This project has been, I don't know, kind of therapeutic in a way, helping to build something instead of trying to take it." Over the next few weekends, we made steady progress on the pond expansion. Word spread through the neighborhood about our project, and soon other neighbors were stopping by to check it out and offer help. It turned into something of a community effort, with people bringing food, lending tools, or jumping in to help with the work. As we neared completion, I found myself actually looking forward to Derek's company each weekend. We developed a genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and the shared experience of creating something together. The day we finally finished was cause for celebration. The expanded pond looked fantastic, with a deeper swimming area, a gently sloping beach, and even a small waterfall feature we'd added as a final touch. I decided it was the perfect opportunity to make good on my mental promise from months ago. "Hey Derek," I called as we stood admiring our handiwork. "What do you say we break in this new swimming area? Why don't you bring your family over tomorrow afternoon for a little pond party?" Derek's face lit up with genuine joy. "Really, Jack? That would be amazing. Are you sure?" I nodded, smiling. "Absolutely. In fact, let's make it a neighborhood thing. We'll invite everyone who helped out to come enjoy the fruits of our labor." The next day, my backyard was filled with the sounds of laughter and splashing as neighbors enjoyed the new and improved pond. Kids played on the beach area while adults lounged in the deeper end or relaxed on the dock. Derek and his family were right in the middle of it all, clearly having a blast. As I watched everyone enjoying themselves, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. What had started as a bitter dispute had transformed into something that brought the whole neighborhood together. The pond was still my private property, but I'd found a balance between maintaining my boundaries and sharing the joy it could bring. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Derek approached me with a cold drink in hand. "Jack," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I can't thank you enough for this. Not just for inviting us today, but for giving me the chance to make things right. Working on this pond with you, it's changed my whole perspective. I realize now how important it is to respect others and not take things for granted. I clapped him on the shoulder. I'm glad to hear that, Derek. And I want to thank you too. Your help made this expansion possible, and I've actually enjoyed getting to know the real you these past few weeks. We clinked our drinks together in a toast to new beginnings and unlikely friendships. As the last guest left and twilight settled over the pond, I sat on the dock, reflecting on the journey of the past few months. The rippling water before me was a testament to the power of standing firm in your convictions while still leaving room for growth and reconciliation. I had protected what was mine, but in doing so, I'd gained something even more valuable: a stronger sense of community, a new friendship, and the satisfaction of turning a conflict into a catalyst for positive change. As I watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky, I felt a profound sense of contentment. My oasis was now more than just a private retreat. It was a symbol of resilience, forgiveness, and the unexpected ways life can bring people together. I smiled to myself, already looking forward to more summer days spent by the pond, sharing its beauty with friends and neighbors while still maintaining the boundaries that made it special. The road hadn't been easy, but the destination had proved more rewarding than I could have ever imagined. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.